Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to the stream. The word of the day is vehicular. Vehicular. Accent on the hic. As in extra vehicular activity. Whenever I hear that, I always think of NASA in the States, NASA from the 60s. And I think of 1,000 people all sitting together, all with exactly the same haircut, all wearing the same Hawaiian shirt. Or maybe that's just the astronauts. Anyway, welcome to Let's Talk Business. I am Bill, the company's expert. And today we're going to talk about careers, strategy, and making money. Everything related to business, everything related to careers. But it's our chance to get a little bit further away from the whole how to pass a job interview thing. So I'm going to be taking your questions later on. But I'm going to be, you like my hair? I spent a lot of time on my hair this morning. We're going to be talking about, I'm going to give you 5 important factors that if you want to start up your own business or you want to have a side hustle, my recommendation would be that you have these 5 factors. And that's what we're going to get into right now. But if you're here, say who you are in the chat, say where you're listening from. I always find that stuff interesting. So also as a reminder, if you are not subscribed to my second YouTube channel, The Company's Expert 2, please do so right now because this live stream will end up archived there. So it will not stay on this channel. A couple hours after it is finished on this channel, it'll move over to my secondary channel. And that's where you can find all these live streams if ever you want to go and listen to this kind of thing for fun. Even more of me. I want to say thank you to everybody listening. I want to say thank you to, I've got 2 new Patreons today. I appreciate all my Patreons. Thank you so much for the support. If you so wish, you can support me on Patreon. You can also join my channel as a member. That's this thing right here. Join my channel. You get a free video every week, and you get priority in answering questions, that kind of thing. So there you go. Over in the chat, over to you guys. We have Mohammed says hi. We have Al Gaddafi, if I'm saying that right. Greetings from Libya, right? Capital, is it Tripoli, right? Libya, Tripoli. Ray Martinez is here. What's your opinion when you are being interviewed by the hiring team, but one of the members is someone that will be reporting to? We're getting a little bit away from the whole job interview thing today. But what you're describing is a pretty typical situation. That's called the hiring manager. The person that you would be reporting to would be the hiring manager, and that's a typical scenario. Hello from Pakistan. Hello, Mohammed. JSK, Jisk. I remember you from last time. Hello there. Thank you for your contribution to employees who want to get a job. No problem. No problem. The motivation for doing this, one of the big motivations for doing a channel where I talk mainly about that is because I have found it to be the most fake process in business. And that's saying something. Like even more than sales, the BS factor is even higher in HR than it is in sales, in my experience, being on both sides of it and teaching it. So I know how frustrating it can be, especially for young people just starting out, and they haven't prepared you for this, which I think they should prepare people in schools for it. Al Gaddafi says, I'm going back hopefully to a new job after several months, and I've been unemployed for the last 3.5 years. Any advices or recommendations? Well, it's hard to express it in, like just a few seconds, but, listen, getting a job is a skill like any other. It is a completely separate thing from being qualified for a job. Just because you are qualified for a job doesn't mean that you are skilled in finding a job and getting hired. They are 2 separate things. In a perfect world, they would not be 2 separate things. They'd be one and the same. But in the world we live in, they are often 2 completely separate things. And if you have skills in one, you can add a lot of value. You also need to have skills in the other in order to be employed. And so learn about it. That's what my channel is mainly about. You can watch a lot of my videos. There are many other sources of information. And like I always say, get advice, but getting advice has its limits. Go out and then try a bunch of stuff. Okay. Don't just try one thing over and over and over. Try a variety of different things over and over. And if you keep doing that process, you will eventually make it your own, find out what works for you, put your own spin on things, and that will result in success. But you have to put some time in to learn that process. Will you give some advice in long-term strategy? I'm leaving my first post-university job and starting my second. Any way to avoid job hopping, stigma, and accelerate salary growth? Once again, that's very, very general. Look, there are many ways to be successful, okay? Some people find that job hopping under certain circumstances works. Under others, it doesn't. But being able to add value is very important. You have to do something that people want and they'll be willing to pay for. So, look, it's not possible to summarize it in a few seconds other than learn. And the other thing is that, a lot of things in life, okay, you have a long-term strategy and that's good, okay? If you're going into a traditional career, you can have a long-term strategy. That's great. But remember, the world is constantly changing depending on what industry you're going in, depending on what economic conditions are in your current region and environment or your industry. It's not possible to predict everything to the nth degree. You're going to have to be flexible as the economy changes, as supply and demand change. You're going to have to be flexible. And all I'm saying is that it may not be possible to make a grand plan like 10, 20, 30 years out and then just stick to it and have everything go precisely on plan. That's not usually the way it works for a lot of people, okay? For more traditional careers, you could do more of that in the past. But depending on where you are, what your goals are, and what you have, it may not be necessarily the way to do things, okay? It's usually some middle ground between making a long strategic plan and going with the flow, okay? That's all I can say without going into somebody's specific situation. So smart and simple. That's a good name. Final Shot 95. Hey, Bill, do you have any advice on super day interviews? 3 or 4 back-to-back 30-minute interviews. Is there anything that I would watch out for? I'm not too familiar with that, but I don't like the idea of it. Job interviews, the reason why they're so ineffective is because people are trying to make decisions about you without actually getting to know you. So making them even shorter, like 30 minutes, like a speed dating kind of thing, would exacerbate the problems. People get to know you even less. So therefore, they are more dependent on assumptions, prejudice, heuristics, stereotypes, things like this, archetypes. So that's what they're going on. And the less they really get to know you, increasingly, the more they will be going on those things. So, yeah, that's kind of what you can expect from that. I don't recommend that way of getting a job anyway. Most people get jobs through networking, and that is the way to do it. So, while applying for posted jobs and dealing with recruiters is a part of a job search, okay? It's one method. Also look at networking, also look at other techniques. Those are much better ways of getting jobs, and you tend to get much better jobs. It has a higher likelihood of working out when you go through other methods. So do research on those if this is all new information. Radu, I recognize Radu. Radu says, do you feel that having a job in management is overrated? I've gone from a management role to working in a non-management role, and I find things less stressful and easygoing, but now I feel underused. Oh, definitely, it can be. But I mean, remember, management is a very flexible term. It means almost anything you want it to mean. It means the person that's in charge of the 16-year-olds at McDonald's, or it could mean a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I mean, it covers such a gamut of things. And it depends, right, on what your specific situation is. So sometimes, yes, sometimes it's a BS term, where you're just a employee and they tack on a few other things you don't want to do, usually doing some of the dirty work, and they call you a manager when really you're not really managing anything. Other times, however, and the most extreme version of that would be doing a side hustle or having your own business. It's the most complete liberation of yourself from essentially being exploited and being a slave. So, yes. And in the middle there, we had Al Gaddafi says, thanks for the encouragement. Your videos are always helpful. Well, thank you very much for saying so. That's very nice of you. We have got the questions immediately. Look at that. We got 20 people here. Thank you for being here. I'm not even getting to any of the notes that I had made to talk about because we got instant material. So there we go. Hello, I have a question. I received a phone call with a job offer, but didn't negotiate salary just yet. How would one bring up the negotiation of compensation in an email professionally? Here's how. Don't, okay? The only time you bring it up is after you've gotten a job offer. Before you receive the actual job offer, you want to avoid all of that, okay? Because the only reason they bring it up is so that they can eliminate you if you want too much money. It is not possible to negotiate until you have a position of power. And you won't have a position of power until they've decided that you're the person they want, okay? So that's how it works. I have lots of videos on salary negotiation, so check some of those out. Okay, this is not something you want to bring up any earlier than it's forced upon you. Okay, what you want to do is you want them to fall in love with you, realize that you're the person that they need, and then once they've gone to all this effort to make you a job offer and decide that you're the person they're going to go with, okay, that's the point where you can turn around and say, great, I'm so happy you're picking me and I'm looking forward to working with you. I just need you to give me a little bit more money. And at that point, if they believe that you're being serious and you're not bluffing, there's pressure on them to just give you what you ask for. At that point. But if you try and do that any earlier in the process, they'll simply eliminate you and go with somebody who's not making demands on them. Okay? That's how that works. Thank you, A. That's very, very nice of you to say. And it's comments like that make my day. So thank you very much. There you go. So anyway, I was going to talk about today, and I'm going to do this in the gaps when I've sort of haven't got an immediate question, and that is to give you guys 5 things that you need to be successful in business on your own. Okay, and the first thing is to have a screw you attitude. It's really true. You have to start, if you're going to start a business, you're going to start some kind of entrepreneurial venture, you've got to have that attitude in the beginning. This attitude that says, I'm tired of this thing that exists out in the world. It should be different. Or I'm tired of the way these people are doing it. I can do it better. And you've got to have that attitude because you'll need that attitude to create something new and different and have the drive to see it through to the point where it's profitable. Okay. That's I've worked with a lot of startup founders and a lot of small business owners, and a lot of them from the point, not from the point where they're revenue positive, but from the point where they're actually starting up. And I've seen a lot of people fail. And the reason that they fail, one of the telltale signs, as far as I'm concerned, is because they don't have this attitude from the beginning. They think it'll be kind of a nice thing to do, and they like the idea of imagining themselves as sort of the boss of an operation and bringing in lots of money. They like that vision, but they shy away from doing the actual work, and they don't have that drive that you really need to see it through. So you've really got to start with that almost rebellious kind of attitude. You really do, okay? Al Gaddafi says, you've just answered my next question, which is what kind of impact I should show at the first stage of my employment. You answered that by making them like you. What kind of impact I should show at the first stage of my employment? Well, they should like you in the interview. They should like you from the very beginning. That should start immediately at your very first interaction with them. And sometimes that's before your job interview. That can be when you're corresponding with a recruiter or hiring manager or another person at the organization. Okay. They have to instantly feel you're the type of person that I don't mind dealing with, or maybe even I enjoy dealing with. That's how they have to feel about you. Put it this way, if they feel that way about you from the get-go, chances are it'll have a much more favorable outcome in the end. Radu. Thank you, Radu. Yes, but yes, this is originally set up to talk about everything but job interviews. But hey, if everyone's here and they're asking me questions, I'd be a real jackass to say, no, I refuse to answer any of your questions. I refuse to help you. But I have a live stream on Wednesdays where it's all about job interviews. That's the focus of it. I guess in a way, I'm still kind of deluding myself. You see, my background is on growing businesses, and I've also done work on the side with startups and small business and that kind of stuff. And I love to talk about it. That's really my core competency. And so I keep trying these efforts on my YouTube channel to sort of have conversations around that stuff, because that's what I'm really passionate about. But there's a lot more people out there that are looking for jobs than there are people that are looking to start companies. So you got to go with the flow. Yeah. So second thing, I shouldn't do it this way. That means something else in some cultures. This means something else in some cultures too, but less of that. And that is to really know what's important in a business. It's funny watching the chat. Listen, Radu is awesome because Radu is actually following the guidelines that I've suggested. So Radu, you are awesome. Don't let anyone ever convince you otherwise. But listen, if you guys have questions about job interviews, that's fine. Just ask them, and I'll take things as they come. But yes, it's really important. And this is a great life skill, okay? I don't care if you're starting out and you're wanting to get a career job in a company, okay? I don't care if that's the extent of your ambition, or you're an entrepreneur type, or you're a management type, whatever, okay? But really learning what's important in a business, in a money-making venture, that is invaluable to your career, okay? Even if you're just someone who works as a tiny cog in a big machine, and that's something that you're perfectly happy doing, it will help you do your job better, okay? If you understand the actual concerns of the business. Because when you work in a large company, there are a lot of priorities. And I remember working as a worker and as like a lower management type. It was really annoying because the company would communicate to you, and they would say, this is important, and this is important, and this is important, and this is important. All these things are important. All these things that contradict each other. We want things fast, yet we care about quality. Yet we've got to really reduce the cost, but we care about safety and environmental concerns. It was just total contradictory. And the obvious question that a lot of workers would have is, well, look, how do I prioritize those? Which is number one? Which is number two? Which is number three? Then I can actually make decisions in my job. And the response you would get back from a lot of organizations is, oh, well, everything's number one, right? It's stupid because they don't want to admit that something is lower priority. They want to be perceived as prioritizing all the politically correct stuff, all the things that you're required to do by law, all the things that you want all your stakeholders to know that you're prioritizing. And then you want to prioritize all the stuff that you really care about, like your profit margin. So, this kind of thing. So it's hard to know what's actually important in a business. Should we do things well for the customer, or should we also document and systematize what we do, because those things kind of contradict. You want to make it fast and you want to be attentive, but you also want to take the trouble to systematize and document everything you're doing along the way so you can cross-train people, etc. Right? Very hard. So learning what's actually important, and the best way to do that is to actually start a little business venture. Okay? It costs you absolutely nothing. Go online, go on social media, try and sell something. See if there's any takers. Okay? Something that you could be capable of doing, a service you could provide or a product you can deliver. And you try that. I recommend this to a lot of people. And it's amazing how many of them just don't really get it. But if you do, if you take this challenge and you figure it out, you will have insight that all the other people around you, even if you have a career job, will never have. You will know what's important. And with that information, even if you don't want to do anything on your own, you will be able to climb the ranks because you understand what's important. The Mind. That's a great name. It's the Mind. Says, haha, that's the case for me now. Everything is important. Yeah, I know. That's a universal thing, at least in my experience. Al Gaddafi says, sometimes suppliers or other business partners will distribute my priorities, so how to react? Now, distribute your priority. By that, you mean they want you to do everything at once? That's a tough one. What you would do, how to react, sometimes you just got to give the reaction that they want, which is, yes, sir. I'll make it priority one. Start to what? Joey? Yeah. So understanding look, here's the deal. In a business, you've got basically 3 questions, okay? And they correspond to the 3, what I call the sort of triad, the 3 most important things in business, which is number 1, operations, doing the thing you do, generating value, okay? Number 2, marketing, and number 3, which is a distant third, the finance accounting side, the money side, okay? Number 1, the question is, can I create this? Can I do it, whether it's a product or a service? Okay, number 2 is, can I sell it? And then the third one is, can I sell it at a profit? Okay, so 3 very important questions. And a lot of times when I've encountered people that try and do stuff, they have, of the first 2, which are the most important, the sort of operations side and the marketing side, they have one of those things down. If they're a technical type person, they usually have the operations side down. They can create this thing, and this thing is valuable. It adds value. It's better. It's more convenient. It's got something about it that people want. Great. On its own, that does you no good, okay? But it's the first piece you need. Second thing is, you then have to be able to go out and sell it. Okay? Who are you going to sell it to? How do you reach them? And how do you convince them to buy it? That's the second thing you got to do, right? I know a lot of extroverts, the sort of sales and marketing types, that have that part down. The problem is they usually don't have the first part down. Okay? So they got that piece. And then coming in at a distant third is the money part. Okay? The finance and accounting function all roll together. It basically means you just can't run out of money. Okay, you've got to have money to power the next stage. Okay, and a key thing there is, which kind of leads into the third point, which is, instead of always asking, how can I pay for something? Instead, you try and think of, how can I eliminate the need for having to pay for that thing? Okay, a lot of times we're just using our brains and actually being open-minded and trying to think of alternatives. If we actually ask that question, we can come up with very creative ideas and find a way around having to pay for things rather than solving the problem of, raising capital to pay for it. The questions are drying up, but people are still here. Okay, so that either means you guys are listening, or I'm boring you to death and you're tuning out. But yeah, so those are kind of the first three things that I would recommend of 5, right? Number 1, have that kind of screw you attitude, rebellious attitude. I'm tired of this. I could do it better. Or I'm tired of this. It's bad. Why doesn't someone do it like this? That's the thing you've got to have to give you the drive. Okay. Number 2, really understanding business helps. Understanding what's important in business, which is number 1, delivering value. Number 2, being able to sell it. And number 3, not running out of money, being able to finance your business, because money is the lifeblood, especially in the beginning. And number 3, instead of always wondering how to pay for something and having to go and borrow money and all this kind of stuff, instead of that, try to think, how can I eliminate the need to pay for this rather than just muscling through with the brute force method and raising money to buy all these things that you feel you need. Nice speech. Thank you. I do my best. No, keep going. We're listening. Oh, okay. Okay, great. Yeah, those are the 3 most important things. Now, just those things alone, I would say 90% of people that try and do startups, okay, that I've dealt with for actual startups, which is sort of the hardest business challenge there is, doing an innovative startup. 90% of people that I've worked with don't have those 3 things already. Okay, they're not doing those 3 things. They're already missing some element of that, which, does not bode well. Now listen, when we start in the beginning, none of us know this stuff. You learn it. You have to learn it. Okay. It's really important. The attitude thing just comes just by living in the world. I'm sure each and every one of you, you've had frustrations with something. Maybe you tried to order something online and they did a terrible job. Maybe you had to deal with a company because you're paying for their service, whatever that is, and they're doing a crappy job. They're delivering a bad service, or their customer service is terrible, or their communication is terrible, or they sold you a product and the product does not meet your expectations at all. Just these frustrations, these types of frustrations over time, they can culminate in having this rebellious attitude. This attitude where you realize, what, I could do this better myself. Or that belief sets in. That's where that sort of starts from. Okay. Maybe you work in a career type job and you've been on the inside of an organization and you've seen internally how they do things. And you think, this is ridiculous. I could do a better job myself. Right. I have the capability of, the operations side, delivering the thing, the product or service. And I'm maybe more tuned into the needs of the customers. Why don't people just do it this way? The first person to do it that way would have an edge. That's the beginning of this journey. And depending on what your goals are, you could turn that into you having your own business operation that becomes your primary source of income. It leads to financial freedom. It leads to not having to work as a corporate slave your whole life. That's where it begins. It's just a learning experience. It's a journey that some people take. That's where it starts. Number 2, knowing a bit about business. Now, once you have that drive, then you become passionate to learn this stuff. Like, seriously, I should do this. I'll do it in a way that I'm minimizing my financial risk. I'm not betting the farm. I'm not betting my entire financial future on this. I can do it maybe in the evenings, just kind of see if I can start something up on the side. I'm not going to tell my employer about it, right? I recommend you don't. Employers never like to hear that stuff. But, if you can start it, figure out ways of starting it for very, very little money, sometimes zero. Okay. And then start learning, because that type of learning will enable you to do this career path, it'll also help you make more informed decisions if you're just working at a regular traditional career, working for an employer. Right? Figure out how to eliminate the need for paying for things. And there you go. You're well on your way. That's the first 3 things. How do you deal with the ego? Oh. Well, I haven't solved that one myself. Isn't the answer like the id? Something like that? Or at least it was 150 years ago when everyone thought what Sigmund Freud said was true. Maybe be more specific, Joey. In what context are you talking about the ego? Startup stuff, you need to have a little bit of the ego. Okay, you need to have put it this way, you need to have a little bit of confidence in yourself. You can't start your own thing thinking that, oh, I don't know anything, I'm no good, I'll never be able to succeed. You got to start with this attitude of, I've seen what the professionals are doing, and it sucks. They don't know what they're doing. It's chaos. I could do a better job. So you have that confidence. At least that's how you feel, right? You're going to need a little bit of that to get through this process. Now, it's a little bit of a humbling experience, especially in the beginning. Anything you learn the hard way is going to be humbling, right? You're going to realize that you don't, in fact, know it all. And everyone experiences that in their 20s/30s. That's kind of a normal thing. People who go on to do great things, usually, unless they're some kind of weird, exceptional genius, they all experience that, okay? In youth, you have that drive and that passion and that conviction, and that's great. Don't let anyone beat that out of you. But then you have to be open-minded enough to learn why things aren't working, and maybe open-minded enough to try something else. So I don't know if you call that ego, but it's confidence, self-esteem, whatever you want to call it. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist, so I can't really comment too much on on that kind of stuff. Please share some interview tips for changing industry or sector. I have an interview with a hiring manager. The domain is the same, project management, but it's in a different sector. Well, okay. As a general response to changing your industry or sector, I would recommend that you go through networking, because the problem everybody encounters when you try to change careers or you try to change industries or sectors or whatever you call it, the standard metric that recruiters use is years of experience. Okay. So one of the first questions they're going to have for the new job is how many years of experience you have doing this job. And if the answer is 0 because you are trying to change careers, that's going to be a problem. The way around that is to get the job through networking, where they're not hiring you based on your resume necessarily. They're hiring you based on how professional you are, how, it's basically your soft skills, how you present yourself, your communication skills, your charisma. Just by contacting somebody, you are demonstrating your commitment and passion to work in that new area. Okay? If you didn't have a passion for that area, you wouldn't be doing this because it requires effort. You would just be applying to every type of job out there and then just taking whatever bite that you get. Okay? But if you're reaching out to someone specifically in a specific area, that signals that you're at least somewhat interested in that area. It's not just hot air when you say this. It's not just lip service. There's something behind it, okay? So for changing careers, the general rule is you have to go through networking. Now, the thing you said about project management, it's you've got experience in project management and you're trying to get a project management job, but in a different sector, okay? That means different industry in my parlance. That depends entirely on what they're looking for, okay? Because there's no rhyme or reason. Some organizations, they will prioritize specific skills. Other ones will prioritize general skills. So if you're a project manager, you might have been trained in project management methodologies, which can be applied to any sector. If you're getting hired in a large organization, that's maybe all they care about. If you're working in perhaps a smaller company, it's less structured. They don't care if you know things like agile and stuff like that. They want to know, have you worked in construction? Maybe it's a construction business. Okay, so you might have been a project management, but you haven't worked in construction project management, so the answer will be no. So it entirely depends on what the new organization is looking for, and there's no rhyme or reason. Sometimes they will value things you have, sometimes they won't. So it could go either way. I'm sorry if that's not very helpful, but that's kind of the reality. If you're at an impasse and they don't seem to value what you have, try getting a job through other channels, particularly networking. Okay, that's usually it can be the tiebreaker, and usually is. Can you recommend some books to learn about finance and taxes? Well, I mean, taxes, you got to start off with what country you're in, because taxes will change. Yes, I have a course where I take you right through that. It's right. My screen is backwards, so there. There's a link in the description to my $100 MBA course. For $100, I take you through basically everything you learn in an MBA, including the finance course. I recommend a book there. I don't have the title memorized, but it's one that they used in several universities around the world. And it's very, very good. I actually recommend 2 books. But to try to answer your question, here's what I'd recommend. Go to your favorite university. Okay, go to their website. If you have a university in your city or town, okay, go to their website, look at the business faculty, look at their MBA program, Masters of Business Administration, which is the gold standard for how to learn business, and look at the finance courses, and if they have like a tax law course, something like that, look at that course, see if they posted the textbook. If they have, take the ISBN number or the title and the author, search on Amazon, see if you can find it, order it. You can order an older edition, maybe a couple of editions old. So that's maybe 5 years old, something like that. They're really cheap. They're like $5 or $10 US, something like that, plus shipping, I guess. And that would be what I would recommend to do to learn that stuff. Don't buy, in my opinion, don't buy a coffee table book about finance. Okay, go to the source for that stuff. The thing about business is that it's really not rocket science. It's not like getting a medical degree. Okay, anyone can read and understand the university textbooks. Okay, you don't need like 10 years of business school to understand the textbooks. I mean, if you've graduated high school, most of what's in all the textbooks you will be able to understand just by reading it. Okay, so like, don't take the 4th finance course in a row. Take like the first one. That's all you really need, and do it in that order. True, confidence is so important. Yeah, you develop that over age, though. Everyone, to a degree, their confidence will generally go up as they get older. Okay, so if you don't feel you're a very confident person right now, just wait. Just wait. It comes by living in the world, having seen some stuff, having done some stuff. The world loses its mystery. And when you see people who should know what they're doing, and you see them not knowing what they're doing, and you lose that magic, and you gain confidence. You think like, well, if they can do it, I certainly can. Right? That's something that comes along. Thank you, AA. I appreciate that. Radu, you might even be able to find those books in your local library. Yes, you can. But usually, like if you're serious about learning stuff, listen, everyone's got different learning styles. For myself, I would rather own the book, especially when the book is $5. Like if you're really committed and you find a good book, it's not something that I could read in 3 weeks. Like if you're trying to learn finance and you got a textbook that's this thick, But hey, whatever resources you have. Are you doing mergers and acquisitions? Are you talking about my course, or are you talking about our buddy who was talking about finance and taxes? If you're talking about my course, I cover several electives where I say, if you're interested in this, here's an overview of it in a video, and I recommend a book. Now, the book I recommend for mergers and acquisitions, I've actually read. It's a thick book like this. It's the one they use at Harvard, or at least they did several years ago in their MBA program. They had a course on mergers and acquisitions, and that's the book they used. And so that's the book I recommend, and I provide a link to it where you can buy it and all this kind of stuff. So if you're asking about my course, that's my answer. Take a breath. Okay, fourth point that you need if you have the ambition of having your own business, having your own income source, either as a side hustle or as your main line, okay? And that is to realize that the financial function of a company, okay, the accounting side, the finance side, that is removed from the value generating part of the organization, okay? There is a lot of emphasis, especially in the last 20 years, put on the financial component of businesses, the accounting department, the finance department. Chief financial officers have gotten a lot of power. And the thing is, their function is not really the value source of the organization. I don't care what anybody says. I have a master's degree in finance. It's a sideshow. It's a sideshow. One of the functions in the financial department or the accounting department, one of the big important functions is the treasury function, to be able to obtain money to fund whatever thing the business is trying to do. If you want to open a branch office, if you want to launch a new product, if you want to do research into something, takes money. And so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to your chief financial officer and say, look, I need you to raise some capital. We need to fund this. And, it's a service. It's a service that serves the business. It is not the value generating machine of the business. That's something that I think a lot of people are under a misapprehension about. All the emphasis on the stock market, all the emphasis on crypto and trading and all this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, okay, those things exist, but it's not typical of most businesses. They don't make money through the financial operations. The financial operation serves the rest of the business. It's like the HR operation. It's the thing that maintains your workforce, right? It's a necessary evil. In a perfect world, if you could call the shots, you wouldn't have a workforce. You would just make the money. But in order to make the money, you have to have a workforce, this thing that you have to pay for. And you have to support them. And there's all kinds of laws and regulations about, how you do that. And you have to throw money at the problem. You have to hire HR people and, all this kind of stuff. So it's another one of those. It's a cost center. So that's the thing. There are a lot of startups that I've worked with, for example, and they have started by getting a government grant. There are many government programs that try to encourage people to start startups, to stimulate the economy. And in many countries around the world, they have government programs that do this, and they give loans and they give grants. So some aspiring entrepreneur will take out one of those grants or loans, and they'll start creating something. They'll start developing a product. And, it's like they end up, I've seen people on this sort of unending quest for money. They start to, their funds run low. So now they have to go out and raise more money, get more grants, get more loans, see if they can find investors. And they take their focus off generating money. The whole point is a business. The whole point of a business is to sell your product or service. And that way you have money coming in from customers. But for some reason, they don't spend any of their time on that. Instead, they try to raise money through the financial function, through getting grants, through getting loans. How much money can we borrow? They want to get investors. Now, none of that stuff is necessarily bad, okay? And it has its place. But the primary function of your business is to generate money from customers. And a lot of startup founders end up spending literally 90% of their time and effort on raising capital through other means other than customers. And that means they're not really paying attention to the whole, let's sell something and make money from it. And a lot of them ultimately fail. Okay? Finance is not where the value is generated. That's point number 4. Thanks for the answer. I asked this question because I didn't know where to look for this stuff. That was finance and taxes. Yeah, like a good textbook. Anything you want to learn, for business, certainly. I recommend textbooks. Because if you go to your local bookstore, where I am, in Canada, we have Chapters, we have Indigo, and there's a lot of other smaller bookstores too. And you go there and you look in the business section, and there'll be tons of books that are sort of written by business leaders, like celebrity business leaders, books by Bill Gates and Richard Branson, and, books about Steve Jobs and things like this. And, they're fun and everything or whatever, but they're not textbooks. They don't teach you things properly. So to really learn how marketing works, or how accounting works, or how finance works, or how taxes work, how all that stuff works, my recommendation is to get an actual textbook, okay, that is used in a university, that like a legitimate university that teaches this stuff, that's accredited. And if the university is very well regarded, that's a bonus. Okay? It legitimizes that book. Okay? You're not likely to find a book with a lot of misinformation and huge gaps being used in that way. Okay? I'm sure there's exceptions, but the general rule is if it's used in a university, in a well-regarded academic program that teaches it, it's probably good. And thanks to Amazon and other sources online, you can just order the stuff. And, there's a lot of students that want to get rid of their books. They want to sell them. And so there's a surplus of perfectly good textbooks just floating around out there that people can't get rid of fast enough. And it's a great resource for people who just want to learn, who want to learn this stuff. Like if you want to learn how to make money, in my opinion, all that information is out there, and it's really accessible. You learn partly by getting the theory and partly by doing things, getting experience. Okay, thank you, Joey. The Mind says, 1 Minute Manager, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, etc. versus university textbooks. What's your personal opinion? As I always learn from you. It's funny that you mentioned Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm going to give you my personal opinion on this. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, in my opinion, is crap. I've read, I don't know if that guy has one book or many books, but I've read the one book or the main book, whatever he's got. Crap. Misleading. Dangerous. What I remember of it was basically saying flip houses to make money. And it was the type of thing that a lot of people were saying before 2008, when we had the Great Recession, caused, as far as I can tell, by the American real estate industry. And what my objection is that finance is based on the idea of risk and return, okay? Risk and return. Those two things go hand in hand, okay? You can't talk about a return you're expecting to make without talking about the risk, the likelihood that you will have that outcome. And so that book talked all about the return you can make without talking about any of the huge risks that the person would be taking. Now, for real estate, it was based on this assumption that prices always go up. And for those of you that were around in 2008, you know what happened, right? Prices went up until they didn't. They started to go down, and then everything imploded. Because everybody made the assumption that prices will always go up. You can't lose. Well, as it turns out, you can. And people did. So I read that book because everybody was talking about it. I read it before that, and that's what I got from it. It was like, no, knowing finance, I know that, they're sort of, it's like telling a story and giving the best case scenario as the thing that you could expect and not mentioning any of the typical things that happen or the downside that could likely happen. Very dangerous. That was my impression of it. I don't claim to be an expert on everything that guy's done, but that's just my opinion on what I was exposed to. Pranay says, what do you think about service? Is it software as a service startups and a customer success manager role? Well, I've been out of touch for the last 5 years or so on that kind of stuff. I'm not down with the absolute latest tech startups and trends and all that. Software as a service is a well-known thing. Okay, it can work well. In my experience, there has been some pushback to it because people like to make these predictions like, oh, okay, we're going to take everything, we're going to put it in the cloud, and customers will just be okay with that. Now, you can sell it by talking about its upside and all the great things that it will do. It'll provide reliability, there'll be unlimited bandwidth, unlimited storage, et cetera, better than stuff on site. The problem is that beyond a certain point, and this is just my opinion, based on my experience, beyond a certain point, customers will not want to put everything in the cloud. Okay, they just won't, especially business customers. It's very hard for them to relinquish total control and trust someone else. And these things go in cycles. For example, in Canada, we had one of our major cellular networks go down like 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. Across the country, it brought a lot of businesses in this country to their knees. They couldn't conduct business for several days. And things like this. And it opened the discussion again about is it wise to have these large telecommunication, monopolies, essentially. If you put everything in your cloud, you put all your eggs in one basket, someone steals the basket or someone loses it and then you're screwed. So, it has its place. It certainly can deliver value, but like a lot of things, it's not as rosy as at least the predictions that I saw predicted. Okay. There's nothing wrong with it in general. As always, the devil's in the details, how you do it. Okay, there's a lot of software as a service businesses that I've seen fail. It's not because software as a service is bad, it's just because those particular startups, what they were doing just didn't catch on. And many more have been successful. So there you go. Now you're asking about a career. Now I'm not sure what you mean by customer success manager role. That sounds like something you would have in a very large corporation. Okay. But as a career, if you're a technical person in software as a service, chances are you'll be able to get a good job. Okay, that's my impression. It's in demand. Where I am, they can't hire enough developers, especially cloud developers. So yeah. What? Dad doesn't to be reliable? I couldn't have put it better myself, Joey. Words to live by. Rule Hayes says, do you let your potential employer know you've been considered for other positions at other organizations when being pressured for an immediate answer regarding your employment with them? Well, what do you mean? What, like, you're pressured for an answer? What's the question? Like, are they demanding that? What's the question they're asking? Are they asking you whether you're staying? And does that become a premise for you to better negotiate your salary in lieu of the requirement of an immediate decision? Listen, that's based on a bluff. Like it's basically saying, like, where I think you're going with this is because you have another job offer or a potential job offer on the table, you have more bargaining power to demand more salary from your current employer. That's what I'm getting from what you're saying. Yes, that certainly is the case. However, be prepared for your bluff to be called. If you're saying, I want more money, and if you don't give me more money, I'm going to leave and go to another employer, prepare for them to say, sure, go then. Because usually when employees say that, most of the time, they don't know how to negotiate, they don't know how to position themselves properly, and it's a bluff. Okay? They don't actually have a job offer waiting for them that pays more. So they like to say these things. I don't know what the percentage is, but it would not surprise me if it was 80 to 90% of the time. They say these things, but it's a bluff. The company says, well, we're not going to pay you more. And then the employee just takes it. Okay, that's usually what we see. So based on that, in general, employers won't be fazed by you threatening to leave unless they were to pay you more money. The other part of that is that if you're threatening to leave, that also signals that you're not really happy working there. So from their perspective, why should they pay you more money when you've just demonstrated that you're really not happy working here? Or the only reason you're here is for the money? And is that the recipe for a fabulous employee? No, it isn't. So that's the problem with that situation. Okay, so what should you do? If you're serious, here's what you should do. Get a competing job offer, okay? Get a competitor or something willing to pay you more. Get the offer in your hand, in writing, okay? And then go to your current employer and say, I'd like more money. I've got a competing offer. Can you match it? And if they say no, it's like, okay, see ya. And a lot of times, as I've said before, I've been on both sides of this. The employer will need for you to leave to realize that you're serious and it's not a bluff. And then the day after you leave, they'll call you at home and say, wait, let's talk. Okay, you need how much? Okay, I think we can work something out, right? But before that point, they would have never compromised for you. Okay, that's what I've seen. I've seen companies do that to employees. I've even been a part of that process. Because everybody loves to bluff. Everybody likes to say, oh yeah, I need more money. Everybody thinks they need more money. At every level, in every company, in every industry. They all universally feel I should get paid more, right? And some of them are not shy about saying that. And as an employer, if you took the attitude that, oh, you need more money? Okay, we'll pay you more money. If you took that attitude all the time you were told that, you would not be able to afford your labor force. That's the problem. And a lot of times it's not based on anything. They feel they should get paid more because they feel they should get paid more. It's not based on anything in reality. So hopefully that makes sense. Will Adams says, is it worth taking a slight pay cut if you know that the new job provides skills that lead to much more lucrative positions down the road? It certainly can be, okay? It isn't universally, okay, but it certainly can be. It depends on the details, and it depends on what your goals are and the details of the job and how well it fits with you. It depends on the likelihood that the new position will turn out to be all the things that it appears to be, okay? It depends on a lot of things, okay? So you have to sort of judge each case on its own merits. What you can do is you can do research, on how important those skills are. You can go on LinkedIn, you can do people searches. For example, if you want to be a manager and you feel that 5 years experience in a certain role will qualify you to be promoted to the manager role. Okay, if that's your theory, it may be possible to do research to test it. Go on LinkedIn, do a search for that role in that industry, the manager role in that industry. Look at the people who are in that role now. Look what they have. Do they have 5 years experience in this? If they all have it, that kind of suggests that you need it. If they don't have it, most of them don't have that, then it maybe suggests that that skill or that thing is not as valuable as you think it is to get that position. So, you can maybe do some of that research and just try and confirm. Okay. But listen, everything you do is a risk. Every time you jump into something else, it's a risk. Okay. And it's up to you to decide whether that risk is acceptable. If you want to do great things in life and you want to learn lots of skills and, all this kind of stuff, you generally have to take a little bit of risk. Okay. But you have to go about it in an intelligent way. You have to try and manage the risk. Okay. Try and minimize it as much as possible. Okay. And just be smart about it. Okay. Simply taking risk is not necessarily what pays off. Okay. The risk is incidental, trying to learn things, try to do new things. Right. So it's, I can't really give blanket advice on whether a concept works or not. It does sometimes, but not all the time. So you have to sort of gather as much information as you can. If another thing you could maybe do is talk to people in the new role or that you would be dealing with in the new role, if possible. Try and find out alternate options, things like this. Okay. And have a better idea of what you're getting into, what the likelihood is that it's going to work out. Things like this. Okay. And that way you can somewhat manage the risk. But if you're young and you've done everything you can do, you've done your due diligence, generally, I would say go for it, depending on what it is. Okay? There'll be plenty of opportunity later on to play it safe. Okay? If you're in your 20s, certainly that's the time to try new things, manage the risk. Don't screw yourself financially trying to do this stuff. But, a little bit of risk is sometimes necessary to allow great things to happen. So just, that's kind of how I would lay it out. If you're talking about a slight pay cut, yeah, that seems like a reasonable thing, depending on your financial situation. Thank you very much, The Mind. That's nice of you to say. I'm glad you're getting some value. Rule says, thank you for your potent response. Not a problem, Rule. The Mind. So what's the correct strategy? The Mind, what were you asking about last? Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Look, we were talking about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We're talking about, like, I don't think that's like flipping houses. Just basically, as I recall, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, what I remember from, like, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, I read this book, was take loans and use it to buy houses. So it's completely leveraged. Fix up the house, flip it, sell it, and you make a quick buck. You pay off the loan, and you make a nice sort of overhead, like a nice profit margin. Yeah, okay. But I mean, the problem is that requires several assumptions. It requires that, first of all, someone will give you the loan. Secondly, you don't get burned buying a lemon house. Thirdly, you can flip it. You can do things to it that people will, appreciate. And unfortunately, that encourages a lot of dishonest behavior. The people that cheat people by doing actually fake improvements that don't cost anything, they will come out on top, whereas people who actually do proper improvements that cost more, they will not be as successful. And then it relies on the assumption that you can sell the house within a very short amount of time, and also that you can sell it for more money than you paid like a short time ago because of these cosmetic things you've done. You know what I mean? So, I mean, there's a lot of assumptions there. And all through that, housing prices and other metrics in the economy have either not changed or they've just been on a steady increase, right? I mean, that's a lot of ifs, you know what I'm saying? And the book, as I recall, didn't mention any of that. You know, if you actually calculated the risk of each of those steps, you would need data, you would need all kinds of stuff. That would work during periods where the stock market is booming. But you know, things go up, things come down. If you happen to do that when the stock market turns just a couple of percentage points down, the whole thing blows up in your face. You lose a ton of money, or you're stuck with a house you can't sell. I mean, you know, and then you got to pay back this massive loan. So, you know, it was just, that's what I recall from like this book. That was kind of the only thing I remember. And that's all I'm going to say on it. So what's the correct strategy? The correct strategy is actually learning about how these things work. Learn about business, learn about finance, the idea of risk and return, how you calculate them. It's based on past history. It's a statistical analysis of revenues and percentages and prices as they fluctuated over time, right? What's the variance? What's the standard deviation? Okay, you would calculate all of that. That would tell you the odds of doing this. Now, even if the odds are good, if you're betting your entire life savings on this working out, you know, it could be a 90% success rate. But if you just happen to get that 10% failure rate, things don't work out, you're screwed. I mean, is it really worth it? It's an asymmetrical payoff for the chance of making, say, $50,000. You risk losing everything. Now, is that worth it for you? If you only have one shot. And risk is usually used in the sense that you're going to be doing the same thing over and over and over again. Like you've got many transactions happening, 90% of them work out, 10% don't. That's acceptable. But if you've only got one shot, one throw of the dice, 10% chance of losing everything, going bankrupt, you know, et cetera, losing your house, your car, all that. Is that worth it? A lot of people might say no. So you've got to learn how this stuff works. If you want to learn how that stuff works, you study finance. One finance textbook will explain to you the fundamentals of how all that stuff works. It's elementary finance theory. That's an element of business. Okay, so there are no shortcuts, in my opinion. You just have to learn that stuff, or you're playing a game you don't know how to play. It's like sitting down at a poker table with 3 master poker players, and it's your first time playing. You know, you could win, but you're far more likely to lose. Hey, it's Min. Good evening, sir. Am I on the right time? Well, you made it. So, time's right for me, my friend. The mind. So when you say it's a bluff, so what is the best strategy to not be seen as a bluff? Well, it's not being seen as a bluff. A bluff is when you say, like, you know, you better do this to me, or I'm going to do this to you. And a bluff is when you're not actually able to do that thing you're threatening. Okay? So for example, you say, you better pay me more money or I'm going to leave. Now, if you don't have another option, like your only other option besides working there is unemployment, and you've got rent to pay or you've got expenses, you can't leave, right? It's just, you're bluffing. You're saying you're threatening to leave when you know it's an empty threat. You're not actually going to leave. You're just saying that to see if they will bump up your salary because they fear that you're being truthful, right? That's a bluff. And all I'm saying is that when you bluff in negotiation, you have to be prepared for your bluff to be called, okay? So, you know, maybe you hate your job anyway. Maybe you feel that your skills are in high demand. And even though you don't have another job offer in your hand, you feel that, look, within 2 months, I could probably get another job offer. So if they say, no, we're not going to increase your pay, you know, you're still going to be able to find something better, right? So the way to negotiate is you have to have other options. You have to have better options. Now imagine if you had a job offer in your hand. You're making X. The job offer is for X plus 20%. Okay? Now you tell your employer, look, you better pay me 30% more or I'm leaving. Right? And they say, no, we're not going to do it. You say, okay, see ya. Now, whichever way it works out, you're still going to come up on top. Either you're going to leave and make 20% more than you're making now, or they're going to bump up your pay by 30%. So either way, you're going to win. Okay? So the way to win at these things is to have multiple options. The more options you have, the more power you have, the more likely you're going to come out on top. Okay? Yeah, Joey, exactly. That's the key to succeeding. Aiden says, I'm 24 and almost 1 year into my first job, but I find it difficult to come up with an independent development plan for my career. Do you have some tips or focus points for long-term goals? I think your long-term goals are going to depend on what you want to do. You know, if you're 24, what do you want to do? Now, when I was 24, I didn't know what was out there. That's the problem I think a lot of people have. You know, I mean, how are you supposed to make a plan when you don't know what your options are? There's a lot of things out there. There's a lot of options that you have no idea that exist. So how are you supposed to make a plan when you don't know what your options are? It's not easy. I think the only plan you can really make is to say, look, I would like to do this. You know, maybe you want to be a manager. Maybe you want to change careers and work more with people or work more with children or, you know, learn this particular skill or move into this industry. That's about as specific as I think you can make it without knowing more. Okay. Like you're 1 year into your first job. Any plan you make, I would say this, okay, the odds are is that any plan you make at that stage, it's going to be so far removed from where your path actually goes. because there's all kinds of things out there of which you are unaware. So that's fine. Hey, we all start off like that, okay? And it's great because there's all kinds of awesome options for you. Okay, so the more you can find out about what's available, the better. So all I can say is like, try and do some soul searching, try and learn about the types of things that you would like to do, like know yourself more. For example, if you think you're a great people person, but then you take your first job and you end up working with a bunch of people that you really don't get along with, and you reconsider, you think, well, maybe I'm just not a people person because working with these people does not make me feel good. You're learning more about yourself. I don't do well when I got to work with people like that. Maybe you come to the conclusion that I want to get out of this industry. This industry, it just has a really bad culture. People are mean. People, they're biased against young people, whatever, right? And so you reassess. You say, I'm going to leave this industry. Okay, so look inward, and at the same time, try and find out what else is out there, okay? If you're not 100% satisfied with your current job or your current place, apply for other things. See what's out there. Learn about, like, I do a channel on how to get jobs and stuff, so I would recommend that you learn about how to get jobs, because that's a totally separate thing. Like I said at the beginning of the stream, it's a totally separate thing being qualified for a job than being able to get hired in that job. Okay, getting hired is a whole separate skill set. You got to be able to sell yourself. Okay, so that's a totally separate thing from having like skills in a certain area. Hopefully that makes sense. I'd actually like to talk more about that. Maybe I'll do a live stream on just that kind of thing. But great question. Rule says, might I add, my current employment above and beyond my qualifications was very much influenced by interview advice from your YouTube videos. Wow. Well, thank you very much. I hope it was positive influence. Great. Listen, I always say the same thing, and that's like, look, listen to advice, but then go out, like, don't just spend all your time just listening to advice. At some point, you have to go out and test it, okay? And no advice you're going to get from me or from anyone else is going to be like 100% accurate for you or for your situation. And you get conflicting advice, right, from different sources. So how do you know? How do you know what to do? Well, the tiebreaker is your personal experience, okay, is applying advice and seeing how it holds up. And we were talking about confidence earlier in the stream. Nothing will give you confidence more than having done stuff yourself. No one can tell you you're wrong if you've done something, okay? You know it works because you did it, right? No one can then tell you, oh, that doesn't work, that'll never work, because you know that's false, and you've proved it wrong, right? So I encourage people, like, try stuff, Don't, like, manage the risk, but try stuff, especially when you're young. You don't want to bet the farm on anything. You don't want to take huge financial risks that will totally screw you for like the next 10, 20 years. You don't want to do that, okay? I've seen people do that, and it sucks. I've seen people lose their house over starting their own company, things like this, okay? Not good. You manage the risk, Right? But after getting advice, start applying it. And if it sounds like that's what you're doing, at least with my advice on how to get a job, that's great. And for some people, it may not work, depending on what they're trying to do and who they are and how they're going about it. Saini says, good morning. In the place where we are working, they are paying us with a currency that is losing its value every day. Yeah. In our contract, we sign to get paid with US dollar. What is your recommendation? Oh, well, I don't know if I have one. I mean, it depends on what your options are, and it depends on what your arrangement is with your employer. It depends on a lot of things. All I can say that's kind of general advice consistent with this stream is that the great thing about being self-employed, having your own business, having a side hustle, is that you're not on a fixed income. So as I've spoken about before, one of the advantages is that you're not tied, you're insulated from the risk of inflation, for example, okay? Because if your currency is losing value and you're doing business in that currency, if your costs are going up, you raise your prices. I mean, you just float with the currency. As your costs go up, your revenue goes up, and they kind of go like this, right? Whereas if you're on a fixed income and your costs are going up, you have no control over this. You're subject to your costs rising and falling, but you can't influence this at all. That's your salary or that's your hourly pay rate, and it's fixed. That's the problem. If you feel particularly entrepreneurial, that might be a good inspiration to do a side hustle, like a little kind of business thing on the side. If that's the type of person you are, that's one of your goals. Okay. Otherwise, you have to find some kind of solution with your employer or another employer. It just comes down to that. I think you kind of know that already. I can't give specific advice, sorry, on that one. It really depends on what you're doing. Lauren says, in my experience, when you have a competing job offer and make your current employer aware of it, it never works out. You are seen as disloyal and on the list at downsizing time. Yeah, because you're trying to influence them. Okay. And as I said, employees can't push the employer around. It's very rare that you get that. The employer is the boss. They call the shots and they're in charge of the arrangement. Okay. The only power you have over your employer is the power to quit. They can't influence that. Okay. If you say, I quit, there's nothing they can do. They can't force you to come back to work when you don't want to work there, right? But in every other respect, they call the shots. They can terminate you at any time. They control how much money they pay you. Now, you don't have to accept it, but you can't force them to pay you more if they don't want to. They might say, hey, if you want to work here, you now have to accept a 3-day work week, or you now have to take a 30% pay cut. That's the power they have. Okay. So it's hard to influence the employer. But what I'm saying is that if you have an alternate option, if your employer doesn't, their arrangement with you is not to your liking, you have the power to move to this other arrangement. You have that power. You don't have to simply accept what they're willing to do for you. You have another option. And if you have several options, you have even more power. Okay? And the other thing is that, I did a video on this not too long ago. Employers see workers as being fungible, which means that you're replaceable. One person is as good as the next. And if you don't want to do the job, we'll just hire someone who will. That's unfortunately how they view a lot of worker level jobs. Okay. So if you're demanding stuff that they don't want to give, or if they give it to you, but then that sets a precedent, so all the other workers are going to ask for it too. Usually their position is going to be, no, sorry, we don't do that. Goodbye. If you're threatening to leave, go ahead. But if you want to work here, these are the conditions under which you work here. So I'm not suggesting that you get an alternate offer to convince your employer necessarily. You're getting an alternate offer because one way or another, if your employer doesn't conform to your wishes, you have this other option. You don't need your employer. You have a new employer. That's the idea. You're welcome, the mind. Thank you for saying so. Min, sir, I believe that integrated business strategy can be a good one by thinking from different subjects, departments, points of view. I'm just sharing. Thank you. Integrated business strategy. Well, yeah. It depends what you mean by that. In theory, a proper business strategy should take into account all relevant perspectives. Thanks a lot for taking the time to answer my question. No problem, Aiden. Smart and simple. If you have another job offer, just take it. It will be a 30% raise minimum. Well, it can be. Not always. And you're welcome, Lauren. Thank you for saying so. So, the fifth of 5 that I'm going to mention that I would recommend that people have if they want to start something on the side. But also, this is actually a trait of a great employee too. And that is that you're someone who doesn't shy away from tough problems. Most people, they shy away from really having to think. This is like I guess it's human nature. It's hard to think. It's hard to really turn on your brain and think of better ways of doing things, how to overcome tough challenges. Most people don't do that. They'd rather just fill their belly and switch off their brain, really. I mean, that's especially when you're working for an employer. If the employer isn't forcing you to address these really tough problems, what's the likelihood that you're going to address tough problems that business is having? Probably very, very little, right? That's something that we see. But a really great trait of entrepreneurs and a really great trait of great employees, especially in smaller companies, is that they don't shy away from tough problems. They take it head on. You don't often see that, but that's true. Also, people who, when they come to work, they don't just prioritize doing the least possible to maintain their job. They actually go above and beyond. They address things that need to be addressed. I've seen this over many years in many different, several different industries. Many examples of this. Well, people, they'll come to work. And let's take some mundane example. You come to work and you got to deal with, paying invoices or something. And maybe there's a problem with a particular invoice. You inherited it. You didn't arrange this sale or whatever it was. Somebody else did it. And it's just screwed up. The details don't make sense. It's very complicated. You can't really piece together exactly what the story was. But the customer hasn't complained to you. So are you the type of person that's going to go out of your way to try and rectify that, to try and get to the bottom of this? We're going to go and we're going to reverse engineer what happened. We're going to figure out, I'm going to get the story from a bunch of people, and sort it out. Are you going to do that without anyone telling you to do it? Most people wouldn't do that, right? That's the reality. Hey, nobody's complaining. Nobody's telling me to do it. Why would I do it? Right? That's most people's attitude. But occasionally you'll come across a person that's just so dedicated, or maybe they're so obsessive that, they can't rest until this is completely fixed, right? Nobody will say that an invoice that came across my desk didn't make sense. I don't want to be called out in a meeting, and be held accountable for this. I don't want to look bad because someone's going to hold this up as an example of my work. I'm committed that everything that I deal with has to be done right. That's a minority of people. Those are also the type of people that make great entrepreneurs because, in order to be an entrepreneur, in order to do something well, you can't just phone it in, usually. Most things you can't just phone in. If you're trying to make your mark, if you're trying to introduce something that's better than what's already out there, usually you can't have that attitude. It's also what makes a great employee. And to tie this back to hiring, okay, this is the type of thing that can show up more on networking than it can in a job interview, you know? You could ask someone to say, like, what makes you a great employee? And they could say, well, when an invoice comes across my desk, I make sure that, it's in order. And no matter how screwed up it is, no matter how complicated it is, or how many people have been involved in this thing, and you have to really do some forensic work to sort it all out, I get it done. I cannot rest until I do it. You could say that, but how do you know, if you're an interviewer, how do you know that that's genuine, or it's just somebody telling stories, right? To sell themselves and make them appear as a great employee? You don't. So with networking, you can see more of that person's qualities demonstrated. If you know someone that's worked with them before, you can sort of get like a personal reference or a character reference that can partially inform on whether that stuff is true, right? But that's an advantage of networking. You can see more of that person than anyone can in a job interview. Job interviews are highly, highly artificial encounters. Most people are lying through their teeth. Both sides are doing that. It's very fake. So that's kind of the fifth thing that I recommend. If you want to start up your own thing, it helps having these 5 things. Shona says, what sticks more than being qualified in an interview? Personality? Are you supposed to be personable in an interview? What if my competitors are better qualified? Well, Shona, it depends, but generally speaking, people hire people that they like, okay? So being likable, being pleasant, being charismatic, unfortunately, that really counts, okay? Generally. Now, there's going to be exceptions to this, okay? If you're doing an interview in a highly regulated industry like medicine, okay? Like, look, if you just don't have the medical chops, it doesn't matter how likable you are, they're not going to hire you as a heart surgeon, right? But with some exceptions, generally speaking, because people are fungible, remember that? I was mentioning that earlier. That's employers' view of employees. Workers are fungible. One person is as good as the next. The big question on their mind is, who's going to be more trouble to work with? Now, if you come into the job interview with a bad attitude, or you're a little bit paranoid, or, they make a joke and you don't laugh and you're just kind of intense, chances are, if that's all they have to go on, chances are, is that it's not going to be smooth sailing working with you, right? That's how they think. A lot of times the reality is that, maybe they invite you to a job interview, you go, and they're rude, they're unprofessional, and they say something stupid, and you kind of roll your eyes, and they look at that, they go, oh, okay, that person, I don't think they're going to work out. It's silly. It's absolutely silly. But it's true. This is one of the issues with, the established hiring process, where you're going through job interviews for a posted job and they don't know you. So soft skills are very important. Okay. So being likable, I would say, is number 1. Okay. Being personable, right? Having great communication skills, feeling comfortable. That comes through experience. The more job interviews you do, the more at ease you get. It's almost like public speaking skills. Practice makes perfect. The more you do, the less nervous you feel. I think a normal person will never feel 100% at ease, but, you don't feel absolutely panicked and, out of control. You feel nervous, but, you do it. Like when you do a presentation, if you have to do a presentation for work, you might feel a little nervous. You're getting up in front of a group and talking, maybe making a presentation. But you still do it professionally and very competently, right? Because you've done 100 presentations before, right? So job interviews is just the same. The more you do, the better you get. And also, the more times you've heard unexpected questions or been put in unexpected situations, because you've seen everything, you also feel more at ease because, not a lot surprises you anymore. And you've been in pretty much every situation you're likely to encounter. So that helps too. But yes, being personable is it's very important, especially if you're interviewing with a hiring manager, the person who's going to be your boss. Because if you get hired, they're going to be working with you on a daily basis. So if you guys don't click, or it's awkward, or, there's some other problem, that's going to turn into a problem, right? If, on the other hand, you guys get along great, you have the same communication style, you both like each other, and you hit it off immediately, that bodes well. If that's like a preview of you working there, you're going to get along great with each other. And, if you're put in a sort of work type situation, a higher stress situation, the pressure's on, like a job interview, and it still goes well, that's like a preview. So yes, that stuff is definitely important. What if my competitors are better qualified? Well, if they're more qualified, but you're more likable, usually you will win out. Because remember, employees are what? Fungible. That's how they're viewed by employers. They are, one is as good as the next. It's like gasoline. You got to fill up your car. You put gas in your car. It doesn't matter what gas station you buy it from. It's all the same, or at least it's perceived as being all the same, right? That's how they regard employees. Thank you. I'm entering the marker after 4 years of my college job in sales, so it's unknown territory. I don't know if I can make jokes or what's off limits feeling my way. Yeah, you'll learn that stuff. I mean, look, if you're in a job interview, if you don't feel comfortable, you don't really know what you're doing, it's totally unknown, maybe don't worry about making jokes. If they make a joke, you kind of respond, you lighten up a little, like just be a little conservative if you don't know. But as I say, practice makes perfect. But I can't emphasize this enough, okay? As a component to a job interview or to a job search campaign, include an area of networking. Learn about how to do networking. And I don't mean schmooze with a bunch of people I mean learn how to actually network, okay? I have a course in that. I gotta talk about my course at some point. If you are at an impasse, you don't know how to get hired, you don't know how to interview properly, you don't know how to discover job opportunities, I have a course called Get Hired. It's there, right there. Link in description. Check it out. It's basically everything I recommend in a step-by-step way how to do a job search. And it's partly about how to apply for posted jobs and go to interviews, but it's also about other techniques like how to do networking, okay? You don't have to know anybody, and you don't have to talk on the phone with anybody. You don't have to go to any events in person, okay? For all you introverts out there, you can do it entirely online using social networking, mainly LinkedIn. You can discover a ton of job opportunities that are not posted, and you can put yourself forward for them. So if that's appealing to you, check out that course. Many people have taken it, and it's helped a lot of people. And there you go. I'm going to need to be winding this down in a few minutes, but if you have any questions that I haven't got to, now would be your chance to ask. I can't remember if I already did this, but I want to shout out to my patrons. I think I did, but I'll do it anyway. I want to shout out to my patrons. I got 2 new Patreons today, and you can support this channel there. You can also join this channel as a member on YouTube by clicking the join button, and you get a bunch of stuff if you do. You get a free video every week from me that's for members only, and you also get priority for me answering your questions. So there you go. Yes, and same to you, AA. I'm wondering what prompted your name to be AA, if those are your initials or there's something more sinister there. It's like the guy that wrote Winnie the Pooh, A Milne or whatever. How to get in touch with you? Well, this is basically the vehicle to get in touch with me. Sani? Yeah, if you have questions, just this is what the live streams are for. So I can try and answer your question. I don't really have a sort of like personalized consulting service for free beyond doing these live streams. So this is kind of the way to do it. But yeah, anyway. So this is the stream where I basically talk about business in general. Today we were talking more about careers. I like to talk about entrepreneurship. And for me, entrepreneurship for a lot of people is the sort of end destination for their career. Because the way I look at this, the reality that I see is that a lot of people, they don't learn business. And so what they do is they basically hold their hand out and say to a large company that does understand business, they say, look, you know, I don't understand business. I'll let you take care of the business, but I understand that you can make money through doing this. I don't know how to make money, but if I work for you, will you give me some of the money that I generate? And the business says yes. So they take 50%, usually more, and they give you the balance. So you're making less than 50% of all the value that you generate. Now, large organizations do have economies of scale, so they are a little bit more efficient. However, if you learn business and the business skills you need to sell yourself directly, you can make the same amount of money, except that you're not paying a middleman. You are keeping it all. In addition, you have control over your life. You can set the work-life balance to your liking. And you can benefit from the principle that if you find ways of working smarter, you can make even more money. So for a lot of people, they spend some time working for other people. That's what I did. And then there comes a time when you go out on your own. And that's the end destination. You no longer need anyone's permission to give you money. You generate money yourself because you know how to do it. So that's the advantage of learning business. Okay. And I created a course called the $100 MBA, where I basically put together a thing that I wished I had been able to take in my 20s and 30s. Okay, so for $100, you basically take an MBA. I guide you through it, and you learn everything that you would learn in a university MBA because you're using the same source material. You're using the same textbooks that they're using. Okay, the advantage is that you can do it entirely on your own terms. It's entirely self-study. There are no tests, no evaluations. You don't have to prove to me that you know something. You can go as shallow or as deep as you want into each of the topics. And that flexibility is of value to people, and the fact that it's 1% the price of a full brick and mortar university MBA. What's the catch? The catch is that it's not accredited. Okay, so this is mainly for its intrinsic value. If you want to learn the material, here's a source where you can pay a very small fee and you can learn it entirely on your own terms. You keep all the books. It's a reference, and that's an option for some people. So for some people, this is something of great value to them. So if that's interesting to you, check out the link in the description, and I have that as a resource if it aligns with your goals. But I have some more here. Just my initials. Okay, good. Arthur Anderson. Yeah, they were an accounting firm. Shona, how often do you go live? Well, what I've been doing is every Wednesday, I've been doing a live stream on how to get a job. And that's at 9 a.m. Central Time in North America. I can't remember what GMT that is, like time around the world. But if you're in North America, it's Central Time. It's like GMT plus 5, I think, something like that. So every Wednesday, I do that. And what I have been doing is on Sundays at this time, same time, 9 a.m., I've been doing this stream, which is called Let's Talk Business, where we talk about everything but job interviews. Today, we ended up talking a little bit about job interviews, but I'm not sure if I'm going to persist with this one. This stream actually went really well today. So that makes me want to do more of them. The last couple, I didn't really feel like it was really going anywhere. So we'll see how the second stream works out. But for sure, every Wednesday, 9 o'clock Central Time, North America. It's in the middle of the night in China. It's in the middle of the night just in all over Asia. That's where we can do this. So thank you so much for tuning in. You guys are all awesome. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for the intelligent questions and the quantity of questions you guys sent in. That gave me more than enough stuff to talk about. So that's great because I really didn't have too much prepared. I hope you got some value. Thank you so much. I hope you will join me on Wednesday for another one of these streams. I have new videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I will see you on the next one. So thank you very much. I wish you nothing but the best. Take care.